to the problems with the digestive system, can lead to high blood sugar. We've heard of stress induced diabetes. Many of our friends or colleagues keep telling us it's all because of stress that I got diabetes. BP, of course, it's related to stress. The joint aches, the muscular problems, lack of sleep, all these things we have been hearing over many years. So we know that stress affects all the organs and all the systems in our body. And there are a lot of studies to link the hormonal changes also. So sometimes thyroid deficiency, the estrogen levels going haywire, androgen imbalance, deficiency of vitamin D, insulin resistance, and we keep hearing about, PCOS, that is the polycystic ovarian syndrome, and PCOD, which leads to a disease condition where also it's a combination of various hormonal changes. And the insulin resistance is the main reason for PCOS, where again stress has an important role to play, and the stress hormone, which is cortisol, has an important role to play in aggravating PCOS. So we see a lot of young girls nowadays, even in the 8th and ninth standards, where the menarche has just begun, and they come to a dietitian for correcting the lifestyle and eating a proper diet so that they can get rid of this PCOS at the early stages and can lead a healthy normal life in the future. Majority of the times, we are referred patients from infertility centers, so that again it's because of PCOS and insulin resistance, and the stress levels are very high, the anxiety to conceive, then failed attempts at trying to become pregnant. So there are a lot of things, and underlying all that is the thyroid hormone imbalance, the estrogen and androgen imbalance, the insulin resistance, and of course weight gain. So the biggest factor, the reason why doctors send the patients to a dietitian, is to get rid of the excess body weight. And in the process of losing that weight, in the weight loss program, all these hormonal imbalances are also set right. And many times, the patients are able to conceive naturally, where even the big treatments like IVF have failed. Just a healthy lifestyle, doing the right diet and exercise, having a calm mind, and getting hold of the situation, the hormones become normal and they are able to conceive naturally. After having spent lakhs of rupees for IVF treatments, we have seen patients who have happily conceived naturally and had two babies without any treatment. So this weight gain could be, linked to all these hormonal changes, and just losing weight sets right all these imbalances in hormones. Now, when we are hungry, we encounter two types of hunger pangs. One is the natural physical hunger, and you'll be surprised to see this term called emotional hunger. You've heard of people saying that I'm an emotional eater. So, what exactly is the difference between these two? So, the physical hunger is like a normal feeling of being hungry, and it comes at a particular time, like you have your breakfast time, the lunch time, the dinner time, and it can be satisfied with the right kind of foods. And once you're full, you really don't feel like eating beyond that, and you're satisfied and happy. But when it is an emotional hunger, it's like you're really stressed and you're angry, or probably you're, sad, and you just want to reach out for certain wrong kinds of foods, knowing fully well that it is wrong and it's not good for your health. But you just want to reach out and eat pizza, or maybe ice cream, or maybe gobi Manchurian. And you tend to just gobble it up, you just want to eat it beyond your capacity, because you're angry, or because you're sad, or because somebody said something and you're hurt. So you want to take it out on that wrong food. And after eating that, what happens? We tend to feel really miserable. I've had patients who come and cried to me saying that they got this sudden urge because somebody said something, and they just went and bought one big packet of chips and just ate it in no time, and then they cry after that, and then they call up and they have so many things to share. They say, I felt like doing this, I felt like doing that, I just wanted to speak to you and tell you I'm so sorry I did that. But it's all related to the emotions. Even though they do not want to deliberately do the wrong things, the emotions in their mind and in their body push them to doing the wrong kind of things. So it's really not as simple as it looks like. It's quite a complex process. Now, see, this is what happens. See, the food can distract you from your pain, but food cannot take away your pain. In fact, overeating the wrong foods can create more pain. I'm sure you have encountered people, or we ourselves would have gone through situations in life where sometimes we would have eaten something in a wrong state of mind and later on regretted having doing that. Now, see, this is what the latest research is showing, that habits and not cravings are driving the food choices during times of stress. So, what does this mean? It means that if you are consciously going to have healthy eating habits, and you are going to stick to that, it's like a habit, like how we say when we are kids, we are taught certain basic hygiene habits, good hygiene habits. We get up, we brush our teeth, we have a bath, wear clean clothes. So these are all habits which are inculcated in us from childhood. The same way, if we cultivate good eating habits and do not give in to cravings, then what happens? You look at this girl in this photo. She's got a big bowl of healthy vegetables. And look at what she's eyeing. Her eyes are on the junk food. But if she has made a habit to consciously eat healthy most of the times, then even when she is really stressed, there is a good chance that it'll be that healthy habit which will make her reach out for that bowl of healthy vegetables. And she will not give in to that really, that very tempting plate of the cake or the pastry or the wrong kind of foods. So those healthy habits really make an impact. So, see, these are not going to happen in 1 day or 2 days. Just like how we have got certain other good habits inculcated in us over years, it has taken years for our parents to put certain things in place and discipline us. The same way, eating healthy also has to be disciplined. We have to create those healthy habits for us and for our family members. It's not just that I should eat healthy and the rest of the family can do the wrong things. Or you just keep telling the children, eat right, eat healthy, but we end up eating the wrong things. They are never going to listen to us. So we have to create it for the whole family. Only then we can go through these times of stress. So, see, this is what someone has said. I started to eat foods with nutrients that my body needed to deal with stress. And that is how you're able to overcome it. So, if you look at the picture here, it's got all the healthy things. There's nothing wrong with whatever is there. So, it's just that you have to train your mind to reach out for the good foods. See, this is just a general list of foods to keep you happy. Now, when you're really having some meeting going on and you're really hungry and you thought your meeting is going to get over at a particular time and you can do some other work, but then there is this sudden, extension of the meeting, or there is some sudden activity which has come up and you have to finish that and then come and have your lunch or your dinner. So then there are some of these things which you can just keep in mind and you can quickly reach for it. There are people who skip breakfast many times. A lot of my clients are working in the software industry too, and sometimes they have to get into a call early morning. They kind of think that maybe 8 to 10 the call will be over and then they can have their breakfast. But then when they come and see me, they say that, oh, we couldn't have because the meeting went on, and now it's work from home. So sometimes the meetings don't end on a particular note. It's just dragging on into the next session. So sometimes they skip breakfast and then they are really hungry and tired by the time it's afternoon. So I'm just giving you a small list of foods which you can keep in mind. The minute you feel that your breakfast is gone and you're, slipping into the mid morning or into the lunchtime, just keep these things in mind and just run through these. This is the most favorite of all people, and especially in South India, bananas. Reach out for a banana in case you have skipped your breakfast, or you can have it as a mid morning snack. So, this has a lot of fiber in it, and it has vitamin B6, which is again very good to calm your mind and keep you stress free. You'll not feel hunger pangs as well because it has natural antacids in it. Sometimes when you have skipped your meal, there seems to be a little bit of acid production in the stomach, and you will have those, burning sensations. So bananas are known to have antacid properties, and it will calm down the stomach. So it will help you to focus better, keep your mind calm. Then you have our very favorite orange. Oranges are in season right now, almost the fag end of the season. But if not oranges, you can reach out for anything which is rich in vitamin C. You can have musambi, you can have papaya. Any of these will do. They are loaded with antioxidants. Again, they help to keep your mind calm. These are the jamun fruit. It's loaded with antioxidants called anthocyanins. These are also known to keep your mind stress free. If it is not in season, you could probably just eat some blueberries. Well, I'm sure this is a favorite for many of you. Now, this is the dark chocolate. Again, this has got a lot of potent antioxidants called flavonoids, which is again known to be a stress buster. Only look out for dark chocolate with low sugar in it. You can have one small or two small pieces in case you feel like. Do not eat the whole bar. Okay, this is just to keep you happy and keep you stress free so that you can get on with the next work. Flax seeds, these are again loaded with omega-3 fats. You can just roast some flax seeds and keep it handy, and you can keep munching on seeds. The same way you can use pumpkin seeds, watermelon seeds, chia seeds. Any of these seeds are good to just have it as a munchie. You have your walnuts, you have the dry nuts here, the badam, the pista, the cashew. All these are again healthy snacks, healthy fats, which you can have a small quantity once in a while. Do not do this on a daily basis. The idea is you should be eating healthy meals throughout the day. These are just small tips for you in case you tend to skip your breakfast, or in case your lunchtime is getting postponed and you are feeling a little peckish and you want to just nibble on something. It's only for that. Please don't convert this into your whole breakfast or your lunch. That's not the intention here. This is a quick breakfast item, oat. So you can have oats for breakfast. You can make it like a porridge, and you can make it with either water and add some milk, or you can just you can cook it and add some buttermilk and have it. That's an excellent option for breakfast. Sometimes you may not like the taste of oats, so you can have muesli. That's again a healthy option. Do not have cornflakes. Cornflakes is loaded with sugar, whether it is processed or not. Corn is very high glycemic index. So if you're looking to maintaining your weight and you're looking to not get into any health issues, then corn and cornflakes is not a good option. But oatmeal, oats is perfectly fine. Muesli is also a good option. Greens, plenty of fiber in the diet. So greens in any form. This I've just shown you a spinach here, but all the greens that we have in our market is good for you, good for health. So whenever you feel that you can just have a bowl of greens cooked, mashed, you can just have that and you can get on for some time. The fiber in greens helps the gut microbiome, and it also helps to keep your mind calm. This is a quick fix. So you can just have a small cup of green tea. It could be a herbal tea. Something warm is good to calm the mind and keeps you active for some more time and keeps you focused on your work. So a little small cup of a green tea or any tea is fine. Curd, this is an excellent option if you can have a low fat curd kept in the fridge. It's the summertime now, so you can just have a bowl of low fat curd. You can add some, chutneys to it. Maybe you can have a pudina chutney or a tomato chutney, or you can just flavor it with little chaat masala, and you can use that as a small snack also in case you're getting late. Curd is again, it's a probiotic, and it has excellent calming properties for the brain too. So it will keep you going for some more time. But these are just quick fixes. This is not like what you should be eating on a daily basis. This is not the intention. Ideally, you should be eating balanced meals, and you should be eating a proper breakfast, lunch, and dinner at the appropriate time. These are just quick little things that, in case you're not able to eat your breakfast or lunch on time, this is something to just nibble on for some time till you actually get down to eating your meals. Now, this is what a balanced diet is all about. It provides you with all the nutrients, the carbs, the proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, and fiber. Just to show you what carbs are. So the carbohydrates are basically all our cereals, which is, you can see in this photo, you have the rice and the wheat and the ragi, millets. All of these are rich sources of carbohydrates, and it is absolutely essential to have carbohydrates on a daily basis in the diet. They are loaded with fiber, and it releases glucose into the blood in a very steady manner, keeps the brain calm. People who, I do not know if you've all heard of this keto diet. So the keto diet has variants, and sometimes a particular diet has been prescribed where there is absolutely no or very low carbs, and there have been studies to show, and then there's a lot of emphasis on the proteins and the fats. So there have been studies to show that when the diet is devoid of carbohydrates or very low in carbohydrates, the amount of glucose going to the brain to keep the brain calm is very less. And there are a lot of anxiety related problems, people going into depression. See, on one hand, they are doing a keto diet trying to lose weight, but on the other hand, the emotional disturbances are too many. They slip into depression, sometimes they even have suicidal tendencies, and it leads to a lot of other conflicts at the family level. So carbohydrates are essential. It's mandatory to have a certain percentage of calories coming from carbohydrates. Proteins, extremely important. The Indian diet is notorious for having low protein levels. And I think all of us have to consciously keep in mind that we need proteins to keep our immune system good in this current scenario. So there's no way we can slip up on proteins. The South Indian vegetarian diet has adequate proteins in it. A lot of people ask me that, is it necessary to become a non-vegetarian, and whether only non-vegetarian sources will be, having proteins. It's not the case. There are some important elements called amino acids, which is present in both the vegetarian and non-vegetarian sources of proteins. And the way our Indian diet is formulated, you have adequate amount of cereals and pulses. Whether you take the North Indian diet or the South Indian diet, there is always like rice with dal or sambar, or the North Indians have chapati with dal. So there is something called limiting amino acid, which is missing in the cereal group, and something which is missing in the pulses group. But surprisingly, the way our ancestors have combined the two categories, the complete amino acid composition is available to the human body. And people who are on a vegetarian diet for years do not have any protein deficiency of any sort. In fact, they're much more healthier than people who consume non-vegetarian foods. So it's just that we have to remember the basics. And even if you look at the idli and dal batter that is ground at home, there is rice and there is urad. That proportion of 1:3 has also been formulated so beautifully to completely make it a good protein source. So there is no way that there is a deficiency of proteins in a vegetarian diet. Apart from the pulses and dals here, you can see that I have shown you eggs and meat and poultry. The flip side is meat and poultry and eggs have got another thing called cholesterol and saturated fats. So that could be a slight risk for people who do have issues with the lipid profiles. But dals and sprouts and pulses are absolutely safe. Now, this is something we all love. We all love our ghee and oil. Yes, we do need to have some amount of fat in the diet, but it's always sensible to have it in small quantities, not more than 2 or 3 teaspoons of oil per person per day. 1 teaspoon is 5 ml, so 2 teaspoons is 10 ml per day per person. So approximately, I'm just giving you some numbers so you can do a calculation in your mind. So an individual, a normal healthy adult requires around 300 ml of oil per month for 30 days. That's about quarter kg. So you can just calculate and see how many packets or how many cans of oil you're buying at home, and you'll know where you need to start cutting down. So many times, clients come and tell me that if there is no oil, where will the taste be? So I tell them the taste is in your hand. It's not in the oil. It's in the amount of frying you do. It's in the amount of masalas you put. It's the combination that you do in your recipe, and it has very little to do with the oil. So, and then ghee, yes, a very small quantity of ghee is fine. Maybe just a drop of ghee for your rice in case you want to. But you can't be having ghee saying, some of them say ghee is very good for my bones, ghee is very good for my skin. No, there is no scientific evidence to say that ghee is so great that you can switch over to ghee completely. Please remember, butter and ghee is saturated fat. And we Indians do have a tendency for cardiovascular problems. We can't have too much of ghee and butter in the diet. Now, these are vitamins which are essential nutrients we require in small quantities and they cannot be synthesized by the body. So, definitely, we have to get it from the diet. And here, if you see, we have these three important vitamins, vitamin A, C, and E. I'll quickly show you the important sources of vitamin A, which is important for the immune system in the current scenario. You can easily identify, a lot of people know that carrots are rich in vitamin A and good for the eyes. So you can also remember anything which is yellow, orange, your papaya, your mangoes, the pumpkin, and the dark green leafy vegetables, all these are rich in beta carotene. So that gets converted to vitamin A in the system. You also have the non-vegetarian sources of vitamin A. Vitamin C, all of us know the citrus fruits. Anything which is citric will have a lot of vitamin C. India is blessed to have an amla. Most of the time, we get amla in our markets. So let's capitalize on it and try to have a little bit. Now, mangoes are in season. Raw mangoes are again rich in vitamin C. We do have musambi all the time available. Guavas are again rich in vitamin C. So, and nimbu. Nimbu is, available round the year. So we just add a dash of nimbu to your salads or your dal, and you do get a good amount of vitamin C, which is again excellent for the immune system. Vitamin E present in most of the nuts and oil seeds. So if you see the list here, it's all the seeds and your badam and pista, walnuts. All of these are rich in vitamin E. We also need certain minerals which are important, like zinc and selenium. And these are the foods where you see the zinc, which is like your cereals and pulses, and quite a bit in nuts and oil seeds as well. Selenium, again, you do have them in your dals and your pulses. So the bottom line is, have liberal amounts of dal in your diet. So this, most of the people tend to just keep rice in the cooker and have a colored rice, like a mixed rice, and there is dal or pulses which is severely lacking in the diet. So on one hand, they're missing out on proteins, they're missing out on fiber, and missing out on essential minerals like zinc and selenium. Fiber, we nutritionists never stop talking about fiber in the diet, and we keep pushing people to somehow or the other incorporate fiber. And fiber is the roughage which helps in easy bowel movements. It flushes out most of the toxins in the body, reduces the cholesterol, reduces the sugar levels, improves insulin sensitivity, removes carcinogens. It's proven beyond doubt that people who have a high fiber diet have very low incidence of cancers. And the prebiotic and the probiotic foods, which is again, like if you see the prebiotic, you have onions and banana and oats again here. So these are again, they oats has got a combination of both soluble and insoluble fiber. So these help to grow good bacteria in the gut. So what happens is when you have a higher proportion of good bacteria in comparison to the bad bacteria, your immune system is also very good. Apart from that, there are probiotics which our country has, been promoting for centuries, the curds and buttermilk. Nothing like that, especially in these summer days. And try to have a generous amount of curd and buttermilk in your diet to up the probiotic levels. Again, it will help in the flourishing of good bacteria in the gut. This is what I would like all of you to remember, that when you're eating your meal, if you can consciously try to have, like if you see the proportion of vegetables, the proportion of vegetables is quite a bit. So although fruit is mentioned here because this is known as the healthy plate, we would request you not to have fruit with your meals, like with breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Try to keep fruit as a mid morning or a mid evening snack, and try to fill half your plate or three-fourths of your plate with vegetables, and just a small quantity of whole grains. Now, in this reference, they have given you bread and pasta. But from the Indian point of view, we can either have ragi mudde, or we can have chapati, or we can have brown rice, and combine it with one small quantity of healthy protein. Now, healthy protein can also be just a cup of dal or some pulses, or it could be something made with besan. And the veggies, try not to have too much of the root vegetables, and look at having colored vegetables on your plate. The oils should be healthy oils, like what we can use in our Indian context, like the sunflower or safflower oil, or maybe groundnut oil or sesame oil. All these are healthy. Make sure you're drinking adequate water, and try to have this balance most of your eating times. If out of 7 days, even if 5 days you consciously make an effort to eat like this, your the big meals, especially your lunch and dinner, there's no way stress can affect you. This is like a small sample diet plan, just for you to understand, putting it in perspective. So you can start your day with your coffee or tea, and the breakfast could be idlis or dosas, or you could have oats, or like I told you, you can even have muesli with the slim milk, and occasionally you can have even brown bread with egg white omelette. And mid morning, preferably fruits which are low GI. Now, GI means glycemic index, and it's actually a measure of how quickly a particular food is processed in the system and releases glucose into the blood. So the reference for that is actually glucose. And just to give you an example, the fruits which are high GI are bananas, mangoes, chiku, jackfruit. All these quickly get digested and release sugar into the blood. So it can cause a sugar spike. But if you can have fruits which are like rich in fiber and low GI, like papaya or apple or pears, that's a better option. Now, lunch and dinner is somewhat similar. You'll have a big bowl of salad to start with, and salad is preferably raw vegetables. Uh, you can source organic vegetables, it'll be ideal, and you should wash it thoroughly and cut it into big pieces and have a big bowl of salads like cucumber, onion, tomato, capsicum, carrot, lettuce leaves, cabbage, purple cabbage, which is again loaded with anthocyanins. Have a big bowl of salad, and you can after that have carbs, which could be fulkas, or you could have ragi roti or ragi dosa, or you can have brown rice with a cup of protein. Now it could be either dal or it can be chicken or fish with vegetables, 1 or 2 cups of vegetables preferably, and not the root vegetables, and a small quantity of rice in case you really have a craving to have some rice. And if you're trying to lose weight, then it's better to switch to brown rice with a cup of slim curds. It's more or less the same for dinner. Only thing at night, as far as possible, please try to avoid rice. Evening, you could have a small cup of tea with 2 Mari biscuits, and mid evening is when all of us are hungry, and that's the time we tend to eat the wrong kind of foods. We tend to eat some bhajis or pakodas or mixture, and if we can just stay away from that and keep that as a very occasional cheat meal, once in a week or once in a fortnight, but most of the days, if we can just look at eating proteins either in the form of sprouts or usli or kosamri, or you can just have a clear veg soup, or you could make something based out of a chickpea flour like besan dhoklas or besan chila, something like that, which is protein based. Or for people who are okay to eat egg, you can just have 1 or 2 egg whites also in the evening. So it will keep you going till dinner time. Now, if you notice, the oil that is recommended is not more than 2 teaspoons per day for a normal adult. And the water is 2.5 liters per day. In summertime, you can even make it 3 liters a day. And this is something which all of us can practice as we are growing old, and the metabolism is going down for all of us. Try to eat a healthy diet most of the time, and what you drink also matters. Just because it's summertime, we tend to drink a lot of fruit juices and coke, and because we're feeling hot, try not to have too many of those. Just keep drinking maybe chas or buttermilk, spiced buttermilk, and nimbu pani without sugar is also great. Practice mindful eating. So what happens is, many times we are busy watching TV or talking on the phone, and we're just gobbling our food without even realizing what we're eating. So the minute we start eating carefully and we chew and eat our food, it's better. Then you're able to understand exactly what is going into the system. Also, be physically active. It's important that you do a little bit of physical activity to calm down your mind. It could be any form of activity which keeps you happy. So sometimes just a simple walk in the terrace, because in case you're scared to go out and do a walk, you can just walk in the terrace, and or just walk up and down the stairs. That will also keep you happy. And if you can do some yoga asanas, if you're part of some yoga group, keep doing that. Do some meditation, pranayama. Sleep well. Remember, when you don't sleep well also, the stress levels can really go for a toss. So late nights and staying on the net and having bad sleep patterns will also affect your mood the next day. People tend to be more irritable and grumpy when they've not had good night's sleep. So it's important to also sleep well. When you have an early dinner, and give a gap of at least 1.5 to 2 hours before bedtime. And if you can have a cup of warm milk before you sleep. Nowadays, everybody is having the golden milk, the haldi doodh. It's good for the immunity as well. So if you can have that and sleep well in the night, that's also going to prevent the weight gain. And of course, to manage your stress levels, it's important that you also sorry you also do some activities, like maybe you can have some hobbies. You can keep some passions going, maybe take up some painting or gardening or crochet, whatever that makes you happy. You feel some kind of an accomplishment at the end of it. And if you really need some help, you can always get in touch with a doctor, or you can meet a dietitian to help you tackle the weight gain. And well, I think if you do most of the things right, it'll be goodbye stress and very easy to keep your weight under control. So thank you so much for listening to this talk. And I'm ready to answer your queries in case you have any.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for sharing very important information. It's actually a need of the hour for all of us now.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions here.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
from Ashwini Hulla.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are unhealthy oils?
So the unhealthy oils we can, I mean, I can't say unhealthy, but just the amount of saturated fats being more in coconut oil and palm oil makes them a little unhealthy for the Indian population. Simply because we are at greater risk for cardiovascular diseases. So it's better to stay away from coconut oil and palm oil. But despite that, if you see the western belt of our country, where you have the Goan population, the Mangaloreans, and the Kerala people, they have been using coconut oil for centuries. And at the genetic level, their bodies are capable of handling that much of saturated fat. If you remember a few years ago, there was suddenly this great fad about virgin coconut oil, and everybody was buying that off the shelf and taking three spoons every day, saying it's good for health. So there is no scientific evidence that it's good for health, but it's not really bad in case you come from that population where for centuries your forefathers have been consuming coconut oil. So it may not be a bad idea for them, but the rest of the country can't suddenly start having coconut oil, saying because they are having it's good, even I'll have it. May not suit our systems. So it's not as straightforward as just saying something is healthy or unhealthy. What may be unhealthy for the rest of the country may actually be okay for them to consume. So but whatever it is, they cannot be having more than 2 or max 3 teaspoons per day.
Okay. A very much similar question on oils, like
Okay.
is it shallow versus deep frying, which is lesser of the two evils?
Uh, okay, so definitely deep frying is not a great option. And the shallow frying also depends on how deep your pan is. Like sometimes people, it's again the amount of oil that you use. Like supposing you're making an aloo tikki and you're keeping it on a tawa and just putting a small, 1 teaspoon of oil, and you have managed to fry about 6 tikkis with that, then that won't be termed as shallow fry. But some recipe books do say it is shallow fry. So ultimately, it all boils down to the amount of oil that you have taken for that preparation. And if you are really conscious about it, then even if you have used a little more oil to do your preparation, what you can do is take it out on these kitchen towels that are available, and keep it on that, and then you can probably press it on both sides with some paper napkin, and then you can consume it. So that will again reduce the amount of oil that you're consuming.
Okay. And the next question is it okay to have oils and salads or lentil chutney pudis?
Okay, so oil and salad, a lot of people tend to add a dash of salad oil in their salad preparation. If there isn't too much of a concern with weight loss, and if they are in the healthy BMI range, then it's okay to have maybe a spoon of oil in their salad dressing, but not for the dinner. If they can avoid having salad oil in the dinner, that's a better option. They can have a little bit of it for lunchtime. Chutney pudis are okay. Depends on the amount of coconut or groundnut that people, sometimes there are a lot of variations in chutney pudi, and people use dry copra, or they use roasted peanuts also. So if too much of that is there, then they should be careful at night. The thumb rule is anything after 4:30. Please be cautious about the calorie content. So peanuts may be good. Peanuts are good for health, but again, after 4:35 in the evening, try not to have too much of peanuts in your salads or peanut powder in your chutney pudi. Again, it'll tend to make you put on weight, and with that, all the other issues will start coming. Once the weight goes up, the cholesterol, the triglycerides, the sugar levels, the abdominal obesity, hormonal imbalance, everything will start happening. So the bottom line is after 4:35, be very careful about the calorie count of your meals.
Okay. And the next question is, does caffeine affect our health? And sometimes we use artificial sweeteners instead of sugar. Is it good?
Okay. So caffeine has got good and bad impacts. So the good thing is it's a nervous stimulant and keeps us active. It's like it quickly freshens us up, and we feel good after a hot cup of coffee or tea. Tea also has some amounts of caffeine in it, and it's good that way. And there are studies, the for all the coffee drinkers out there, you'll be happy to know that there have been studies to show that caffeine actually has very good qualities of hepatoprotection. So it protects the liver. So it's good from that point of view. But the flip side is sometimes people tend to have too much of coffee and miss out on nutrition and eating meals on time. I have seen some of the elderly people who keep having small cups of coffee throughout the day, and they tend to skip breakfast or have a late lunch, or then the appetite is very poor. They tend to have a lot of gastric issues, acidity, migraine. So the minute the coffee is struck off the list, the tummy issues are sorted out and the headaches also come down, the nutritional level improves. So it has its own pluses and minuses. There's no need to completely give up coffee or tea. It's fine if, as long as you're able to balance it out and just have one or two small cups in the morning and one cup in the evening. That's perfectly fine. But it shouldn't be that you're addicted to caffeine and you tend to have too much of it and miss out on good nutrition. Now, coming to the artificial sweeteners, the most common which we are seeing all over the TV and advertisements is the sugar free, which is basically sucralose. That's a derivative of sucrose. And a few years ago, it wasn't so popular in our country. We were seeing something called aspartame, which had the brand name Equal. Most people can remember Equal. So there's been a lot of controversy about these artificial sweeteners, and although FDA had approved aspartame many many years ago, after nearly 25 years, they woke up and realized that aspartame is causing a lot of neurological problems and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's in the US population. And around a decade ago, there was a huge campaign against aspartame, and that's when the saccharin had been in the news 30 years ago, saying that some studies showed saccharin caused cancer in animals in the lab experiments. So saccharin did not get so much popularity as aspartame. But after 2 decades, people woke up to the neurological side effects, and now the most popular is sucralose, which is sugar free, Natura, and Splenda in the US. If you look at the scientific evidence, there seems to be some toxicity studies where it has been shown that it has impacts on the liver and kidney function, but it's not conclusively proven. So, my take on artificial sweeteners is, if you are a diabetic and if you are used to a cup of coffee or tea in the morning and evening, I would, request you to not go near any sweetener, because today sucralose may be the hero, but you never know after 10, 20 years what findings will come out of some research. So then by then the damage would have already occurred. So it's better to give up on the artificial sweeteners. If you're diabetic and if your sugars are under control, if most of the time your HbA1c is less than 6, and you're very good with your checkup, with your follow up with your diabetologist, and you're maintaining a healthy lifestyle and everything is fine, then actually a small amount of sugar, maybe just about half a teaspoon of sugar with your coffee in the morning and maybe a quarter teaspoon with your tea in the evening, is better than going in for artificial sweeteners. That's my personal take. So I normally, even the diabetic patients who come to me and they say, "Oh, madam, I really need a little bit of sugar. Can I use a sweetener?" Then I'm skeptical. I don't want to promote any sweetener because I'm scared. I'd rather give them a little bit of sugar, but tell them that it is like poison. So please use it very, very carefully, and don't get into any other, over usage of the sugar. And also for people, if there are any young women in the group who are listening to this talk, there are also studies to show that. use of artificial sweeteners can impact the brain development of the fetus in the womb. So, in case you're trying to lose weight and then have a baby later on, it's better that you do not switch to artificial sweeteners. Be very careful with your diet and try to lose weight the healthy way, but don't look at having any sweetener in the diet. I hope I've answered the questions.
Yes, ma'am. A few more questions. Can I read it out?
Yes, yes, madam, please.
Yeah, okay. What is intermittent fasting, and is it okay to have 2 meals a day skipping lunch?
Okay, no. So, I know that this is a very controversial topic because there are two schools of thought, and there are quite a few people who are in favor of intermittent fasting, and there are again various shades to it. There are people who eat in a 8 hour window and then fast for 16 hours. Some of them eat in 12 hours and then fast for 12 hours. So each one has their own take on this, and unless you're very good with your portion control and with the calorie intake, intermittent fasting is a little dicey, because I've seen a lot of patients who have gotten into intermittent fasting in this last 1 year because of the lockdown and too much of work, and they find it difficult to cook breakfast, lunch, dinner. So they end up having something at 11 o'clock, and then they have a proper meal at 11 in the morning, and then they have some buttermilk or fruits and coffee, tea and all, and then have a proper meal at 7. And then they say that from 7 to the next morning, till 11 in the morning, we are hungry, we just keep waiting. But unfortunately, what is happening is that they are coming back with weight gain and with issues with their acidity, and they have tried doing intermittent fasting in the hope that they will lose weight. But what is happening is, we have grown up eating a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, and the minute we are suddenly going to be faced with a situation where there's going to be nothing after 11 and then it's only at 7, I think the human mind starts consuming more food, in the fear that, oh, I'm not going to get any food till 7 in the evening. Let me eat a little more rice now. Let me eat a little more of this now. And then there's no food till 7. So, what is happening is you're dumping much more calories than what the body can handle at that particular time. And then again at 7, they're gobbling it all up because till the next morning, 11, there's no food. So unfortunately, although it's a great science, and if people could only manage to do proper portion control and eat sensibly, maybe it is really a great method to lose weight and also to keep diseases away. But I think people have got it all wrong, and they're just doing something, looking at the net, and ending up with more issues. So I don't think it's safe to do it on your own. It's better to do it under the guidance of a proper dietitian who will help you through it.
Okay. And then, what's your opinion about refined sunflower oil and also about the salt intake?
All right. So there's a lot of information available about cold pressed oils and wood pressed oils nowadays, and that's any day a better option compared to the refined sunflower oils. And there's all this WhatsApp messages doing the rounds about contamination and adulteration of the vegetable oils that is available in the market. So to be very honest, yes, the cold pressed and the wood pressed oils are the best option. And if we can afford it and we can use it, nothing like it. Anyway, my recommendation for oil is very, very minimal. So even if it is a family of four, I don't think you will require more than 1.2 to 1.5 liters of oil per month if you are not deep frying too much, if it's only for the regular 3 meals a day. But in case it's a large family, it's a joint family, and it's difficult, I mean, to because these cold pressed oils are pretty expensive. So it may not be feasible, it may not be practical in the long run to buy liters of that oil alone for the whole big family. then in that case, it's okay to have a judicious blend of the refined sunflower oil and cold pressed oils. So, see, ideally, the thought process should be that you're buying any refined sunflower oil, just buy 1 or 2 packets, maybe for a festival, or maybe for a function in the house, or some get together in the house, and you use it only for that occasion. But for your regular everyday cooking, for your tadka and your daily breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe have cold pressed oil and use that in sensible amounts. Even if it is cold pressed, and even if the nutritive value is more than the synthetic vegetable oil, you can't overuse oil. You have to be very careful with the amount that you're consuming. So you have to be sticking to that 2 teaspoons of oil per person per day. So I think it's better to have two options on a regular basis. And on the topic of vegetable oil, see, most of these oils are screened by FSSAI. So for the adulteration and all, it's not so much of a worry, because if there is really an adulterant added to it, I'm sure there by now there would have been a big hangama. So I think it's okay to consume some of the branded good company vegetable oils. But one important thing I want to say here is, remember to keep rotating the oil. It's known as oil rotation. Do not buy only sunflower oil. 1 month you buy sunflower oil. The next month you buy safflower oil. The third month you buy rice bran oil. The fourth month you can buy soya oil. The fifth month you can buy corn oil. So you keep changing the type of oil, so that your system gets a variety of the fatty acids. So each of these oils has a particular combination of monounsaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids. So instead of just sticking to safflower or sunflower or safflower all your life, then your body is getting only a particular combination of the fats. That's not good. So remember to keep changing the type of oil. It's not the brand I'm saying, it's the type. So when you're buying the oil packet, you see whether this is safflower oil, whether this is rice bran oil, whether it is a different combination of rice bran and safflower. Like that, you look at different combinations and you buy. But ideally, do not buy too much of any of the oils, whether it is cold pressed or it is the regular refined oil. Do not buy too much of it. And the second question was about salt intake. You'll be rather shocked to know that Indians are the number one in the world when it comes in terms of salt intake. We are supposed to be consuming only 5 grams of salt per day per individual. So 5 grams is like one chota teaspoon of salt. But if you look at the amount of salt that is going into our cooking on a regular basis, it's way beyond 9 to 12 grams. So we are really bad that way as it is in terms of salt intake. So I think too much of salt for our Indian context, we have to be careful. We should not be adding too much salt in the diet.
Okay. And the next is it go substitute vitamins. Substitute vitamins, yeah.
I didn't understand the question. Substitute in the sense what? I mean, not eat the food and have vitamin tablets.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a very nice question. I think another 100 years down the line, we may get capsules saying this is carbohydrate and this is protein and this is vitamin A, vitamin C. We don't need to cook and eat at all, maybe. The space age, maybe. But see, it's in case you're asking me if it's good to have vitamins and not have a food, then it is a big no. So I'm totally against all these supplements and tablets and pills and all that. Doesn't make sense at all, because the vitamin industry is a huge multi-billion dollar industry all over the world, where nobody knows how much of the vitamins are actually absorbed into the bloodstream. People are just popping in the tablets and nobody knows what is actually happening internally. So nothing to beat good old food and eating healthy home cooked meals, nothing to beat it. Absolutely 100 out of 100 points for regular food. But yes, in case you're going through some infection and you're put on antibiotics And many times what happens is, like I was telling you about the gut microbiome, where we have healthy bacteria in our colon, and sometimes when we are given strong antibiotics, it tends to wipe out all the bacteria, the good and the bad bacteria. So it leads to certain deficiencies in the body, and there's a lot of weakness, and the convalescent period takes a long time. So it's good at that time to have vitamin supplements, maybe for just a week or a fortnight, just to get you back to good health. And the minute your antibiotics are stopped and you're back to eating normal food, I'm sure your gut bacteria will also start growing back, and I'm sure you'll be back to good health. So nothing otherwise, I mean, unless you're going through an infection or some treatment, or maybe there is a deficiency. Sometimes we do encounter patients who have had a vitamin D deficiency or a B12 deficiency due to faulty eating habits or lifestyle practices. Then at that time they are put on supplements. So it's again for a short duration. If at all you've come across any doctor prescribing vitamin D or B12 supplements also, it's given with a time duration. You're supposed to take it for so many days and stop after that. You can't be on that permanently all your life. So then there are always natural things to do and get your body to up its vitamin levels. So definitely no substitution, but yes, supplements can be taken only in very specific conditions, but nothing like eating the regular food and getting good health out of it.
Okay. I'm very something similar to this about protein powders and then cod liver oil capsules.
Well, see, I mean, protein powders, I know a lot of people trying to lose weight are taking all these protein shakes. Again, there is no scientific evidence to prove that it helps. In fact, people just tend to put on more weight with proteins, because protein is a double edged sword. So, when you take protein in the natural form and you're consuming it as your dal or as your usli or in a proper diet, the body is able to process it better. But if you take it as a protein shake or as a protein isolate, the body sometimes looks at it as an artificial thing and it processes it differently. People tend to put on weight, they tend to have kidney issues. There are some studies which have also linked soy protein isolate to cancers. So it's not recommended at all, from a general viewpoint, unless somebody is trying to train for an event, like supposing there is an athlete or there is a swimmer or someone or a weightlifter or someone who's going for a competition, and they have to really build some muscle mass quickly, and they are doing some heavy duty exercises. Then under the guidance of a doctor and their trainer, their fitness trainer, they can have protein powders. That is again only for a short duration, 3 to 6 months maximum. But people just buying protein shakes and protein powders, whey protein, and just having it to lose weight causes more harm than good. So protein powders are not advisable at all. And what was the other question? Sorry.
Cod liver oil capsules.
So see, that's again it's usually recommended by a doctor, and it's I mean we dietitians normally don't supplement, I mean prescribe supplements unless there is a disease condition where there is a requirement for cod liver oil supplements. But usually it's the doctor who prescribes these supplements. So from my side, I don't think it's advisable for people to generally keep taking it. If it is a short term thing, maybe for a month, it's okay, but then not lifelong. It's better to take a doctor's advice.
Okay. And then what about intake of how many liters of water per day, ma'am? And is it a good practice to have water before brushing teeth?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Like, how exactly are we supposed to intake certain liters of water
Okay, how are you supposed to take in water on a daily basis before
daily
brushing?
basis? Is it a good practice to take water before brushing? Is that question?
Okay, so see, from the medical science point of view, we don't have adequate research to talk about the saliva that is there in the mouth when we wake up in the morning. I think in naturopathy and other alternative medicines, there is some evidence to say that that has got curative properties. The early morning liquid in the mouth. But from the Western medicine point of view, people normally we tend to just get up and wash our mouth and rinse it and brush our teeth and then have water. So, since I don't have adequate reference for that, I would say that yes, it's better to brush your teeth and then have water. And you can probably start the day with a glass of water. Warm water also is fine. And throughout the day, yes, 2.5 to 3 liters of water is a good number. But if it is very hot and if you're in a humid place where the sweating is too much, then yes, you can even up it by another half liter. So 3.5 liters is fine. But do not go for 5 to 6 liters of water a day, where people tend to do water therapy and they say we should have 6 liters of water per day. That's not a good option, because then you're putting undue stress on the kidney has to remove the excess water in the system, and it can lead to a premature kidney issue or kidney failure. So do not go beyond 3.5 liters, even if it is very hot. And if it is a regular like Bangalore weather, this particular climate, you can have up to 3 liters. That's also fine.
Okay, this is the last one, ma'am. With two different questions, I'll just combine it as one. How
Okay.
about using jaggery instead of sugar? And the other
Okay.
one is, why does a tongue burn? Is it a deficiency?
Okay, so tongue burn, yes, could be a deficiency, could also be an allergic issue that has to be sorted out by a doctor. And jaggery, if it is going to be for a diabetic patient, then jaggery is equally as bad as white sugar. So there's just very little difference between sugar and jaggery. It's just like a small step away. So do not try to substitute sugar with jaggery, saying I am diabetic, so jaggery is fine. I'll have my coffee, tea, everything with jaggery. Your sugars are never going to come down. Neither are you going to lose weight. In case you're trying to lose weight and you're going to be having jaggery in place of sugar, no, you're not going to lose weight either, because the calorific value is the same. And on this same topic, I also want to say that honey is more dangerous than sugar. A lot of people come and tell me, I'm very health conscious, madam. I have only honey every time. But it's very bad, because it's going to cause your sugar levels to shoot up, and weight is also going to go for a toss. So honey is also very, very dangerous. So all three are devils. Nothing is better than the other. So if you really are not diabetic and you want to be careful about the intake of sugar, yes, you can use a small quantity of jaggery. But it's not that it's going to be very beneficial. They say it's got a lot of minerals and iron. It's negligible. It's like a microscopic amount. So there's going to be no great benefit. It's just that psychologically we feel I'm not eating sugar, instead I'm having a jaggery. That's all. Have I answered the question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Uh, okay. Mm.
Any other questions?
There's one question on pink salt. What about pink salt? And
Okay.
can iron be absorbed easily by body? Is it only from leafy vegetables,
Okay.
or
So
is some other? Hmm.
pardon, I didn't get the question. Only green leafy vegetables or?
Oh no, that is the question. Is the iron from leafy vegetables absorbed by the body?
Okay, okay.
Hmm.
So, pink salt and white salt. There's too much of a hype about the Himalayan pink salt. Yes, it's a little rich in micronutrients, but it's extremely, extremely costly. So, and then there are studies to say that we can't use it in the cooking process. So maybe you can just add a pinch of that to your salad, or maybe you can add it in your raita or in your chutney, where there is no actual heating of the salt happening. But it's a little there's too much of a hype about the pink salt. So if you can afford it, yes, you can use it, but do not use too much of it. Better to stick to the simple iodized salt for your regular cooking. And yes, absorption of iron in the diet is difficult. especially for Indian women. Most Indian women tend to be anemic, and there should be adequate vitamin C in the diet for efficient absorption of iron. And sometimes there is a family tendency also to, absorb less iron. Genetic factors are also responsible, and green leafy vegetables are a good source of iron, no doubt about it. And palak is again, overhyped when it comes to iron. You will be surprised to know that our humble pudina, which we get on the, roadside, the footpath, vendors also sell one small bunch of pudina mint leaves for 10 rupees. If you can regularly use pudina in the diet, that's the richest source of iron. And combine it with protein. So hemoglobin is a combination of heme and globin, which is iron and protein. So if you can use the fried gram, the hurgadle, and you can use pudina leaves and make a nice chutney and use it regularly, that dramatically improves your hemoglobin levels. There's also this myth that dates are rich in iron, and the minute someone is deficient in hemoglobin, they say start eating dates every day. But dates are again high in sugar as well. So if you're diabetic, you shouldn't be eating dates at all. No dates, no raisins. So for people who are diabetic or who are pregnant, sometimes we, see a lot of these gestational diabetic girls who are pregnant and diabetic. So definitely they can't touch any of the dates or raisins. And for them, pudina chutney, within a week or 10 days, the hemoglobin just shoots up, and it's very good for health. So that's a good option, which most of us can do on a regular basis. You can even pass this information on to anyone who's having low hemoglobin, and within 10 to 15 days, the hemoglobin levels will go up. So that pudina chutney can be used for breakfast, can be used as a salad dressing, can be used as an evening snack with your, in case you want to have a whole wheat bread or something, like with the chutney, you can put it in between the bread and have it. So in some form, if you can grind it and keep it in the fridge, it will remain in the fridge for 2 3 days, because there's no coconut to it, and that really helps.
Okay. And is it right to eat banana every day as banana leads to weight gain?
Yeah, so that's a beautiful question. See, we love to reach out for a banana. All of us South Indians have got this love for bananas. And I know of a lot of elderly people who go to bed with one banana. They eat a banana and they go to bed saying that their bowels get cleaned up the next morning. So it's okay, we can let them do what they want to do, because they've lived their life doing certain things. Let's not interfere there. But for the youngsters, or for the the middle aged people who are trying to lose weight, then banana is a little risky, because we tend to eat a whole banana at one go, whether it is the big one, the pachbale, or the small yelaki. We cannot just eat a small portion. We need to eat the whole banana. So when you're calculating the calorie intake for the day, and a diet is prescribed to you based on your physical activity levels and your hormones and the amount of kilograms you need to lose on the scale, having a banana every day may put you at risk of minimal weight loss. You may lose weight because all the other things you're doing right. But if you continuously keep eating one or two bananas every day, saying it's good for health, bananas are really good for health. Bananas are a superfood, according to me. But when you're trying to lose weight, or if you're having issues with your diabetes, then you have to be a little careful. The minute you understand portion control, then you'll just eat a small bit of banana just to satisfy that craving, or just to feel good about it, and you will not eat the whole amount of it. So that takes a little while to get into that situation. So, in general, if you're on a weight loss program, and if you're having sugar issues, or your sugar levels are not coming down despite a lot of medication, then our dear friend banana could be the culprit. So, don't have too much of bananas. A lot of doctors have told patients that even if you're diabetic, that yelaki banana is fine. But when the minute the patients are told to stop the yelaki banana, the sugars come under control. So, It's like it's not just about the taste on the tongue, because Yelaki banana doesn't taste too sweet in comparison to the Pachbale Hanu. So people think it is safe to eat that, but it's not. So sometimes it's better to completely avoid bananas till you see a reduction in weight and reduction in sugar levels.
Is it okay if I ask you a last question, ma'am?
You can ask me another four more questions, no problem.
Okay.
No
Then
problem.
what?
I
Hmm.
mean, if it's okay with you, I'll be more than happy to share whatever little I know.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So there are two questions on vitamin B12. One is
Okay.
how can vegetarians get vitamin B12 in their diet? And one
Okay.
more question is it good to plan pregnancy with vitamin B12 deficiency and low BP problem?
Okay. So this is again a very beautiful question. Whoever has asked this question on vitamin B12, it's like I'm so happy to tell you that B12 deficiency and being vegetarian is not linked. There are a lot of hardcore non-vegetarians who eat meat and beef and everything, and still they come with very low B12 levels in the blood. So there is no connection between the diet as such, like vegetarian, non-vegetarian, and B12 deficiency. But you will be happy to know that a vegetarian diet with adequate amount of fiber and a lot of curd and buttermilk helps in the proliferation of beneficial bacteria in the colon, where B12 is actually synthesized. So ultimately, it boils down to the gut microbiome, and it's not so much to do with a diet. So if you look at the internet, they'll say eat this for B12, eat that for B12, don't eat this, don't eat that. It's not the truth. If you're eating a balanced diet like what I showed you, if you're eating adequate vegetables, all kinds of vegetables and proteins and dals and the whole grain cereals, like not the polished ones, wherever you can, try to eat the brown rice, try to eat the whole wheat atta, try to have ragi. The more you have fiber and the more you have proteins and you have the probiotics like curd and buttermilk, within a few days the healthy bacteria in the gut will start proliferating and you will start producing your own B12. Apart from that, the olden days, I do not know if some of you remember, our grandmothers used to keep the leftover rice in a, in a vessel and put water and keep it overnight, and next morning they would add some buttermilk or curd and mix it nicely and give it as a drink in the morning. So there have been studies to say that this fermented rice gruel overnight, which is kept with water and consumed the next day with buttermilk, has helped in the growth of that good bacteria in the gut, and therefore the B12 levels have shot up. So we need some more research on this, but definitely worth a try in case you're B12 deficient. See, this will all take some time. It's not like a quick fix. It's not going to happen in 1 day or 2 days. You'll have to consistently keep doing this for a fortnight or a month, and then retest your values, and then you may see an improvement. And on this question of planning a pregnancy at 33, yes, it's perfectly fine to go ahead and have a baby. But the only thing is B12 deficiency needs to be corrected. B12 and folic acid deficiencies need to be corrected before you embark on this project, because the hemoglobin levels will tend to drop as you enter the second trimester of your pregnancy. So it's better that you start having supplements. Meet a gynecologist, tell them that you're planning a baby, and they will put you on good supplements. Of course, the diet is important, but supposing you become pregnant next month, maybe it will take you 2 3 months to actually pull up your levels in the blood. So why do you want to get pregnant with low levels of B12 or folic acid? So better to meet a good doctor, and she'll put you on the right supplements. Start having that, so that you can become pregnant, and then depending on how your levels are, the doctor will decide to stop those B12 supplements after a while. So I think it's better you meet a gynecologist, and it's absolutely fine to plan your pregnancy. And another thing, in case the B12 levels are very low, sometimes doctors do give you injections also. B12 injections are also available, so that can even be faster than taking tablets in case you want to quickly get pregnant. So that is also another option. I hope I have answered your question.
Uh, yes, ma'am. We'll move on to the next one. Is
Yeah.
it possible to overcome vitamin D deficiency through diet? And there's one more question. Vegan diet says milk and curd should not be consumed. What is your opinion about it?
Okay, so see, this vegan diet is, more for emotional reasons, that you don't want to harm any living creature, and most of the vegans that I have come across are, in favor of it, simply because they don't want any living creature to be harmed in any way, and that's the reason even milk and curd is off their list, because they feel that the milking process and the way milk is collected most of the time is like quite a torture for the cows and the calves and everything. So that's the reason they go off milk and curd as well. But then, unfortunately, there are a lot of good points in milk and curd. And as nutritionists, we want it to be a complete wholesome diet plan. So we do not propagate veganism in any way. Yes, being vegetarian is a good option. You don't even need to eat eggs. But if you can be a lacto vegetarian, where you are having milk and curds and having the vegetarian diet, it's more beneficial from the health point of view. But being a vegan, yes, there are a lot of other health issues with them. They tend to have, issues with their bones and joints, and it's not so healthy per se. Coming to the vitamin D, since our exposure to the sun has reduced, and probably because of the depletion in the ozone layer, and we are worried about the harmful effects of UV radiation, and we are using a lot of sunscreens, and plus the time of exposure is, again restricted, because around 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock, when we should be getting exposed, is when we are either in our offices or we are driving in the AC cars to our work spot. And we Indians, although we are a tropical country, we seem to be having a lot of vitamin D deficiency. So when there is a deficiency detected, it's usually suggested that they take a supplement for a short duration to get out of it. But the long term thing would be adequate consumption of milk and milk products, and exposure to sunlight. So if we can expose ourselves at least for 15 minutes in the mornings, at least between 9 to 10, if it's possible, if it is not too hot, or if it is in the rainy season or winters, even around 11 o'clock, 11:30, if we can even expose on a regular basis for 15 minutes, I think the body has its own methods of synthesizing vitamin D, so that gets activated. So the people who consume non-veg can probably take non-veg also. And there are studies to say that mushrooms are a good source of vitamin D. So that also can be incorporated for people who don't mind eating mushrooms. Yes. Next question, if any. Is there any other question?
Yeah, is it possible to reduce triglycerides through diet?
Absolutely possible. Um, uh, if the person who has asked can get in touch with a good dietitian and work out a diet plan, it's absolutely possible to reduce triglycerides. Uh, I just want to make one clarification here, because I have not been given the value of the triglyceride level in the blood. So there are two categories of people with dyslipidemias. One is family oriented, which is like a genetic tendency to having high triglycerides. It's known as familial hypertriglyceridemia, where they have this tendency to keep producing a lot of triglycerides. So sometimes their triglyceride values will be in the range of 1500, 1800, in that range. Unfortunately, those kind of patients, it's imperative that they are put on lipid lowering drugs all their life, and of course they also need to be on healthy diet, but a combination of diet and the drugs will keep the triglycerides in the normal range. This is a very small percentage of the population. The rest of the population where there is a high triglyceride level is usually to do with the diet and the lifestyle. So the minute they make adequate changes to the diet and cut down the calories, so see, triglycerides are not coming only from oils. A lot of people come and tell me that I hardly touch oil, I hardly eat fried items, I don't eat butter, ghee, why is my triglyceride so high? So triglyceride is actually a product which is synthesized in the liver because of excess calories. Now, calories can come from idli. Idli is a steamed product. There is no oil in idli. Calories can come from rice. Rice is a steamed product. So it's not like I'm eating a masala dosa or I'm eating a puri, and because there is excess oil and therefore my triglyceride is going up. No, it is simply where my body can handle only three idlis. If I consistently eat four or five, the excess calories that I'm consuming is getting converted into triglycerides. If my body can handle only two chapatis at night, if every day I'm going to be eating three or four fulkas, saying it is dry fulka, there is no oil, parvagilla, I can eat it, nothing will happen. That excess calorie which my body can't handle may be getting converted into triglycerides. So you just need to meet a good dietitian who will see your your body mass index, who will see whether how much you need to lose weight, what is the kind of physical activity you're doing, and work out a diet plan and do a proper follow up with you, so that over a period of 6 weeks you can see a reduction in your triglyceride levels. It's absolutely possible to reduce.
Yes, ma'am. That's the end of the questions. And
Oh,
thank you for
okay.
the excellent information shared with all of us, ma'am. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity. It was such a lovely evening talking to all of you. I hope there is something each of us can take back home from today's interaction, and wishing you all a healthy and safe days ahead. Please take care and good health to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Priya. Yeah,
Now I would
Priya for
request, yes, ma'am, Vijay Lakshmi, ma'am.
yeah. Thank you very much, Priya, for accepting our invitation. I wanted to tell that. Now,
Okay.
Anandi madam will address. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. I would request our chair, Anandi Giridharan, to please speak a few words.
Okay.
On
Thank
behalf
you.
of IEEE Women in Engineering, Bangalore section, I thank you, Dr. Lalita Priya, for such a excellent and informative talk, and also giving us guidelines on very good nutrition and weight loss techniques, and also the importance of vitamins. And we are really honored to have you today, ma'am, and answering all the questions so patiently. Thank you so much, and wonderful, ma'am. Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
ma'am. Thank you
Yeah.
all. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And
Yeah.
I look forward to many more sessions with all of you. And it's very nice to
Yes.
interact with such lovely speakers and lovely people. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Vijay Lakshmi, ma'am, for sharing the contact of Dr. Lalita. And that's how we could make this event happen. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. Even my sincere thanks to Dr. Vijay Lakshmi too for giving me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the last part of the session, I would request all of you to please switch on your video feeds so that we can have a group photo.
Okay.
All of you, please switch on your video feeds.
Yeah.
Priya, madam. Lalita Priya.
Yes.
Ma'am, your video is not on.
Yeah. Video. Yeah.
I'm not able to on it. I'm clicking on it, but it's not starting.
You have some virtual background on, ma'am.
Um, no.
If there's some virtual background, usually there'll be some connectivity issues and your video will not be seen.
Virtual background. No, I'm not able to. Should I stop sharing or something? What should I do?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I um
Your screen is not shared.
okay.
Nice to see Raghavan, sir. Hello, sir.
Hello, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thanks for joining, sir. So Lakshmi ma'am is also with us. Hello, ma'am.
Came very briefly. I think he left. Bindu Madhav sir was also here.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I saw.
It's not starting. Video starting.
Priya, you can log in from the mobile and just have a video on. I think that will be better.
Okay. என்ன பண்ணணும் இது என்ன? Yeah, 1 minute, Vijay, 1 second.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. We'll wait. No
Huh.
problem.
Okay. I should start video now. We cannot display your video. Make sure your camera is shared in your browser and is not used in other applications. Then try video. Okay?
Just tell them that you log out and log in.
Can I log out and log in, please?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Sorry.
ma'am.
Just
It's
sorry.
okay.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you after a long time.
Yeah.
Hello.
Same.
Ashwini looks very happy.
Yeah. Because she knows how to manage her weight and stress.
It's almost been a year or more, so it's nice to see all of you.
Nice lecture.
Yeah, very informative. my God.
Very informative, very engaging.
Yes.
And though we were practicing, it was confirmed today. What we are practicing is good. Different types of oils. I practiced this for a long time. Every time I buy a different variety. One sunflower, one rice bran. So I change the oil.
But most of the time, we'll have that brand loyalty, ma'am. We'll usually stick on to the same oil every time.
It's a
Same
it's a high time
same
to
brand
change
or
now.
same oil.
Oil.
No, see,
Very good.
changing oil.
Yeah, information.
also
Usually
helps
we
to
stick on to one.
Yeah.
Laziness also
one,
to try new things, Jayasudha.
yeah, one cancer doctor told me that when we change the oil, we try to postpone the event of getting cancer because our body every time gets confused. It is not getting used to the same type of oil. So always it is a good practice to change the oil.
It's a real information actually.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. She is, just for your kind information, she is a neighbor of me.
Okay.
I usually
Oh,
have every year one talk from her.
Yeah. Yes. Nice.
And
Where
in our
she?
college.
Where madam is working?
Madam works in like Pramila Healthcare. They have a Pramila Healthcare organization in
Madam has joined.
Jayanagar.
Yes.
Okay.
now the
Ah,
video is
she's
on.
here.
Yeah.
Hello.
So I had to request my husband to come because he also was trying all possible. He's a software engineer. I don't understand all these things, so had to come and help me. Nice to see all of you.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
same
Priya.
here. It was very,
All
very
are
informative.
appreciating
One
your
last
talk,
question I
Priya.
have,
Thank
doctor.
you.
Is it good to have a plump body with which is stress-free, or stress-free body with ideal weight? Which is better?
Oh my God. So,
That's very good.
so actually, to be very honest, although I am a weight management specialist and my job is to make everyone lose weight, and I love doing that. Uh, over my 2 decades of experience, I feel that I have come across a lot of people who are actually stress free, but they are not ideal weight. So they're very happy and they're enjoying their life, and but they're not, as per the dietitians, that BMI, they are not perfect, but they are very happy people. So my vote is for such people actually. And it's good to be stress free, and don't worry too much about the weight. So, and there's no need to I have also come across people who are so over health conscious. Nan idu tinnala adu tinnala, and if I also eat one laddu, they'll come and tell me, "Yen ನೀವು dietitian ನೀವು laddu ತಿಂತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ" ಅಂತ. So I'll say, why? What is wrong? Once in a while, everybody should eat everything. Otherwise, what is life? ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲ ನಾನ್ ಮುಟ್ಟದೇ ಇಲ್ಲ, ಐ ಆಮ್ ವೆರಿ ಕೇರ್ಫುಲ್. ಆ ತರ ಇರ್ಲೇಬೇಡಿ. ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ಎಂಜಾಯ್ ಲೈಫ್. It's better to be happy and stress free, and try your best to maintain the weight as much as you can. But if it is not ideal, doesn't matter, be happy. That is more important than maintaining the weight, according to me.
Yes, thank you so much. I fall into that category. That's why I asked
Very
you.
good, very good. Yeah, see, happy people are healthy people. So the more you're happy, and the most of the big diseases, no, this cardiovascular and cancer and all, will not come only when you're happy and smiling and laughing. And definitely stress will not be there. So it's better to be stress free and happy and not worry too much about the weight.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Priya madam, just for your kind
Yes.
information, this is Deepa Shanai madam, who is the one who gave the face yoga that day. Where you want
Oh, okay, yes, madam.
Deepa
Yeah,
madam.
thank you so much. It was a very, very nice talk that day. By the time I came back from the hospital, it was almost towards the end. I saw your session. It was very beautiful. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you so much.
Jai Sudha over? Photo session over?
Yes,
Yes,
I've
ma'am.
taken
Over,
photo.
over,
Yes,
over,
yes.
ma'am.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for
Thank
your
you so
time.
much.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it was very nice. I really enjoyed. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Hope to meet you all soon.
yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Good night. Bye.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Good
Bye.
night. Thanks, madam.
Thank you.